You ever tried cutting a potato with your hands? Well, most people would probably say no because they have a knife. So that's why I want to talk about one of the most important tools in human history, and what humanorigins.si.edu labels as one of the first tools in human history, the knife. I've been forging for 4 years now, and I've worked under a master smith in the American Bladesmith Society, and I even got onto a forging competition on TV called Forged in Fire. I ended up winning this competition, and I feel like I'm qualified to kind of give a few basic tips on knife making. So, whenever you're making a knife, you really only have 3 steps to any knife that you want to make in the world. That's forging, grinding, and putting a handle on. With those 3 steps, you can really, the possibilities are limitless for what you can make. So the most important of those steps is probably going to be forging. Whenever you're forging a blade, I grabbed the wrong thing. Whenever you're forging a blade, you'd like to get the appropriate size billet, you'd like to get the temperature of your forge correct, and you'd like to get the basic shape of your knife billet forged out by the end. So whenever I say billet, I mean a chunk of steel that is going to turn into a knife. I would like to start off with a chunk of steel that's similar in size and shape to the knife that I'd like to make, because it gives me less time forging and less area to make mistakes. And the closer you get the billet to the size of the knife that you want to make at the end, the less metal that you'll waste whenever you have to get to your grinding step. The temperature of your forge is very important, because if you go too hot, you can actually burn your steel and burn all the carbon out, which will leave you with iron. Whenever you have iron, you can't make a usable knife. It's just not hard enough, and it doesn't have the flexibility that you need in a cutting edge. Whenever I say the basic shape of your knife billet needs to be forged out by the end, I mean the basic shape, the very basic shape. So you'd like to start with something probably pretty blocky, pretty square, and then you'll establish the thickness or the height of your knife, then the thickness of your knife, then the length of your knife. So once you have all of that forged out, you'd like to forge your tip in to your blade and the tang into your blade before you get to grinding. So grinding is an important step in that gives you pretty much your finished blade at the end of that step. So it's very important that you do your tang, then your ricasso, then your bevels. I start from the back because this gives me something to hold on to whenever I've got it ground. Then I go on to my ricasso. Sorry, this is the tang, and it gives me something to grab onto. Then I go on to the ricasso. The ricasso is very important in knife making because it's what all of your other measurements, guidelines, and layout is based around. You want a very square, very sharp, very flat ricasso so that you can lay out all of your lines going forward. The last thing I grind is my bevel. My bevel is the flat area on my knife coming from this plunge line forward. Without a proper bevel, you can't have a proper cutting edge because it is going to be too thick of a knife or too thin to properly function. The next step is your heat treat and your temper before you get on to grinding. So the heat treat and the temper is very important before you get on to putting your handle onto your knife. So the heat treat and temper is very important, and according to the American Bladesmith Society, and these 2 books, Heat Treating Secrets with West Sander and Forging Scrap Metal with West Sander, the appropriate heat treating temperature is about 1300 degrees Fahrenheit. 1300 degrees Fahrenheit is about a cherry red color, and it's where a magnet becomes non-magnetic and won't stick to your steel anymore. So it's roughly what I go with. And then for temper, according to all of the sources that I had listed, the temper needs to be about 420 degrees Fahrenheit in an oven for 2 cycles of 2 hours. And that'll give you a springiness to your steel by the end of it. That springiness is going to help you a lot with strength, and it's going to put a lot of the force that you use into your handle because it'll spring back and go into the wood or whatever material you would like to use for your handle. For handle material, you can really use anything. You'd like to have a block or a horn or a limb, really anything similar in size to what you'd like to end with. So if I start with a block like this and I want to end up with a handle this size, I would cut it into roughly the same size piece as what I'd like to end with. You can really make a handle out of anything you'd like. I've seen people do it out of zebra bone. There's a type of paint for cars, and whenever it gets caked up on the floor, they'll dig it up, and it'll be like a big block of paint, solid paint. And I've seen people use that for a handle. Personally, I've used antlers. This is an elk antler. This is a piece of hickory that was growing in my yard that I cut down and have been drying. It's starting to rain. And this is a piece of stabilized spalted beech wood, I think. Yes, it's spalted beech. And it has a stabilizing compound in it to make it hard. You want your handle to be strong so that it can absorb all the forces that you're putting into your blade. With the appropriate handle material chosen, you'd like to go on to shaping. So the rough shaping that I do is just getting it knocked down to the appropriate size, and I like to go and get my profile done as well. So the profile on my blade is going to transfer over and lead to the profile on my handle. So once I've got that ground, I move on to the thickness. The appropriate thickness of my handle needs to be kind of ground in. You want to leave a little bit extra for your final grinding. In final grinding, you'll remove all of your sanding lines and you'll get your very finished shape done. And then you'll move on to polishing. So on a knife like this has all of its finish grinding done. It has all of the polishing done, and the guards and the handle are both shiny. That's usually when I consider my handle done, is whenever everything is shiny and consistent. So, with your knife sharpened, with your handle put on, you'll go into sharpening. Sharpening, I like to get my edge to about 0.040 of an inch. That is 40,000ths of an inch. That'll give you an appropriate cutting edge. It is raining. That'll give you an appropriate cutting edge, and according to Joe Kiesler and Advanced Hunters with Jay Nielsen, 20 degrees is the appropriate cutting angle, or angle for your edge. That'll give you the most cutting for your steel. Whenever you work down, you'll want about 20 degrees for your cutting edge. It's very important that you follow the basic guidelines, but you can really do whatever you'd like for your shaping, for your contouring, and for the design of your knife. It is really raining. So, once you've got your knife sharpened and put together, you now have a usable tool. This is the basic formula I use for every knife I make. Just a bit of forging, a bit of grinding, a nice handle, and a little bit of elbow grease. This may seem like a fun weekend project, which it can be, but it's also my main source of income. I hope that this has given you a new understanding of how knives are made, and maybe next time you need a tool you can cut out the middleman and just make your own. This has been knives for my speech class. This has been cutting out the middleman for my speech class. It's raining and I'm going to have to go. Bye y'all. Have a good day in class. Or have a good weekend, I guess.